how's it going? Just been in Berlin?
Just been in Berlin, went to Interop Accelerate, hung around at Protocolberg, a couple other events. Yes, happy to now be in New York and probably the hottest week it'll ever see.
Yeah, it's so for context, we were going to shoot outside, and I got a quite fearful message from you.
Yeah.
A few days ago saying, you know, it's going to be like 39 degrees in New York. And
we are not built for this weather.
No, we're not. Two lads from the British Isles. It just doesn't really work, does it? So ruined the atmosphere of what we were going to be. But we have ended up here at a place called PubKey, which is coincidentally, it was a total accident that it's like happens to be like crypto themed. But when I was speaking to one of the guys who helped me set up the location booking and stuff for this interview, he said one of the questions he asked me was like, "Oh, what are you doing? Like, what's the interview about and all this kind of stuff?" And I'd said, "Look, yeah, we're just having a chat about like the general industry. We cover it from a media point of view." And he said, "We tend to just stay away from anything that isn't Bitcoin related." And I thought, A, like, good idea. Yeah. and B, if I'd only done the same over the past 18 months, we probably wouldn't be doing this interview. Just like
Bitcoin maximalism.
Yeah, just stacks that. But obviously we're going to talk a little about Stargate as well. So just, can we start at the very top with what you're doing there, your role, that kind of thing? Because you guys have been on a pretty aggressive growth trajectory, I would say, in the last few months, particularly, it feels to me, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like you've been a household name for quite a long time, but it certainly feels like the jet engines are on a little bit at the minute.
Yeah, so I am the foundation leader over at the Stargate Foundation. We support Stargate DAO, Stargate token holders in running the Stargate protocol. Stargate is the first and the largest application built on top of LayerZero. It's what people typically associate with kind of interacting with LayerZero as a protocol. It is kind of the front end and was the original front end for, again, interacting with LayerZero. Over the past year, we really have been as aggressively as possible expanding to new chains. We specifically built Stargate V2 for the ability to kind of expand infinitely. Yeah. And so we had initially launched it about a year ago on 14 chains. And in the past 12 months, have expanded to 50 more chains, roughly, maybe 45 more chains. And then particularly in the last kind of 4 to 6 months, intentionally been quite loud about the fact that the protocol has been able to expand to that many chains at that pace and kind of still work and actually scale with the number of chains that we're seeing today.
To go back a step, the LayerZero, the mothership, I'll call it, inception of Stargate and stuff. Can we just start there with the mission statement for LayerZero and how Stargate came to be before we even go down the interop route a little more?
Yeah, 100%. So you'll hear Brian talk about it a lot. One of the 3 co-founders of LayerZero, they were initially looking to just kind of play around in different ecosystems. They were building on Ethereum, a little bit expensive. They wanted to build on BNB chain. They wanted to build some trading card game and didn't really have a way of kind of building that game across 2 different chains, and kept drilling into the problem that they were trying to solve down to the most kind of fundamental level, which is how they end up landing on LayerZero. They really just wanted to like build this fun interactive game, but as they dug down the stack, realized that there was no fundamental way of sending information from one chain to another. And so that was the kind of original concept of LayerZero. And then as LayerZero as a concept was being built out, obviously 3.5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, as it was initially being built, and it's probably still very much true today, the majority of information that passes between chains and even within single execution environments is about value. Like, how can I move value from one wallet to another, from my wallet to this contract, from this contract to another contract? Now, a lot of that is kind of between different ecosystems, between chains, looking for new incentive programs or just looking to go explore a new chain. And so Stargate almost built as like a proof of concept, as like the first application built on LayerZero. LayerZero is very much this like arbitrary messaging layer that sits one level below Stargate. Stargate is an example of an application that you can use these arbitrary packets of data to move between chains. It just so happens that in Stargate's case, those packets of data handle information about values. So I have 100 USDC on one chain, I need 100 USDC on another chain. I send the information of, my wallet has deposited 100 USDC into the Stargate protocol, use LayerZero to move that over, release 100 USDC into my wallet on the other side. So yeah, the origins were really just trying to securely move information between chains and realizing that there wasn't a secure way to do that, and kind of a crypto aligned way of doing that. Everything was very trusted. It was very, it was kind of mutable, subject to contract upgrades, kind of very dependent on single third parties, and building a fundamental piece of infrastructure that is immutable and censorship resistant was very important to, again, Brian and the other co-founders of LayerZero, and then Stargate kind of born as an example of one thing that you can do on top of that protocol.
It feels to me when we talk about interoperability and stuff, I was murder the pronunciation. I was easier if I just say interop, but it feels like a term that certainly when we talk about normies and people who aren't in the industry, they shouldn't even be aware that it exists. Like it's so wild to me, even after all this time. And look, it's so cliche to go down this route, but I did promise you we'd freestyle it. How do we expect people to understand that even if you want to go and play in this playground, you have to figure out how to get from that one to this one?
Yeah.
It doesn't really make sense as a concept.
It's actually a very interesting question, because if you go back and again, read the information about Stargate when it launched over 3 years ago, read through the documentation, it was very much built as an application meant to be used by developers. So the belief was at the time that this isn't meant to be a retail facing thing. You're not meant to know, like, I'm on Arbitrum, I have the bridged version of USDC, I want to go to Optimism, I actually want the native version. Does this bridge support that route? None of that was meant to be the case. This was meant to be for application developers to, again, build one level above Stargate, have your 2 vaults or 2 Aave instances on 2 different chains, and a user, is lending for 5% on Arbitrum and sees 6% on Optimism and says, yes, I want 6% instead of 5%. And the expectation was that developers will build that abstraction into the process.
Yeah.
That hasn't really happened over the last 3 years. A lot of it has ended up being like retail-facing bridges. And so the typical question that you'll ask people today is, which bridge do you use? And they'll know that they use Stargate, or they use Jumper as an aggregator, or they may use some other bridge. And so over the last, again, 6 months, I think LayerZero have done a very good job of kind of pushing this narrative of controversial narrative of interop being solved. And the idea behind that is, we've realized as people that were trying to build developer tooling for cross-chain messaging and for cross-chain value transfer, developers themselves didn't know that you could build to these chain abstracted experiences. And so again, they were expecting it to fall on the users, and they'll build their siloed instances in these different execution environments. And the expectation is that, again, the users will know that there's a bridge that they can use to go between them, or they'll have a widget on their homepage. So the idea is kind of, we think that there's enough technology available now to build these chain abstracted experiences, but it's about informing the developers of all of the tooling available. Because I've said, again, quite controversially before, that any cross-chain experience that you are looking to build today in DeFi, you can build on top of both LayerZero and Stargate together. And like, all of the tooling that you need to build any sort of chain abstracted experience exists today. You just need to know that it exists. And so part of that story is ensuring that developers actually know that that's true, and can build the user experience that you're kind of describing, which is like, a user shouldn't have to know whether they're on Sonic and want to go to Arbitrum or Solana, or it shouldn't really matter.
Why is that a controversial take?
Because the UX of interop is still so fragmented.
Okay.
And so if you go, exactly as you said, if you go tell a user that actually like, oh, interop is solved, and they're like, well, I had this asset and I wanted this asset and I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know which front end to go to. I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel solved. But the fact of the matter is that like, the technology exists to solve that experience. It is now on the application developers to provide that to the users. And we are trying to do as much as we can to make that easier, as are many people working in the space. But yeah, so it's controversial because, I mean, anyone today would tell you that a bridging experience is still not perfect. You still don't want to have to go to a front end. You still want it to be embedded into a wallet or into a single transaction or whatever it is. I think we've come a long way, but again, I don't think anybody would say that the UX is perfectly solved.
No, I agree. I still think, because the lads laugh at me quite a lot when it comes to like, even just like moving funds around on chain, because I'm like a serial checker. Like, so I had like an experience on a certain thing, and I like fucked up. It was totally my fault, and I was like, now every time I bridge, I'm like, check the route. Like, is it? And yes, because I'm used to that. We're used to operating on chain. But like, I do often think the things that are just second nature to us, like, how on earth would I explain this to?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. But so what I'm hearing from you there, because there's two ways that we could take this, is if we're talking Stargate, LayerZero, and from a developer point of view, so the guys that need to care are building the tech for the people that don't need to care. So where does chain and account abstraction and all of these new things come into the equation there? Like, do you see them as two different, are they two different messages for two different audiences entirely? Do you know what I'm sort of trying to ask? Or like, how does one complement the other or solve the other?
I think they kind of do the same thing. Like, again, the story that we're telling is that all of the tools that you need to build everybody, I would argue that everybody in crypto is actually building for the same user experience. You just want something Web2, something like the Revolut experience or the Monzo. Like the very traditional, I'm on my phone, I click 2 buttons, I've sent you £100.
Yep.
That should be possible regardless of what type of wallet you use, whether it's a smart account wallet or an EOA or a multisig or whatever it is. I should just be able to send you money, whatever chain you need that on. And again, the story that we're telling is like, you can build that today. The tools are there to build that, but it is not on you as a user to know exactly which tools to use. They should just kind of be default in every single application that's coming out today. And so I think ultimately, again, whether you want to talk about account abstraction or chain abstraction or interop, is all really just tooling to provide the users with the experience that I think we all kind of agree should be the table stakes experience.
So what do we, from your perspective, when we first started chatting there and you were talking about deploying on however many chains it is and stuff now, I was flicking through the main account earlier and I saw whether it's like providing infra for things being deployed on like Plume, or whether it's Sophon from like what's going on behind the scenes there? Like, how much of a headache is that? What challenges do you get from that sort of thing? Because as you say, this is all like for the tech guys to worry about in the background. Like, give me some insight into what that actually looks like from it.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's been a very, very interesting experience. So Stargate V2 in particular, Hydra, basically powers day one bridging for a lot of ecosystems. And so particularly for USDC, USDT, and typically wrapped ETH within an ecosystem, Stargate as a protocol is the issuer of those assets. And so again, when you're bridging into a new chain on day one because they've announced their mainnet, you're going to bring all of your USDC in there and find the highest yield opportunity or something like that, which means that Stargate needs to be live, ready to go, full infrastructure ready for day one of a launch, which is typically kind of the highest volume day. And so we've basically been a part of, call it 40 chain launches this year, of like kind of the lead up and sprint to the kind of stress in the last couple of days of RPCs going down, but keep them private, but make sure you are using them, and all of the infrastructure that you're using is kind of reliable enough to power that.
Okay.
And so I suppose the problem that we identified was that each of these ecosystems kind of had this issue in the lead up to their mainnet launch. They needed USDC available, but there was no kind of clear or standard way to deploy that USDC. And you can deploy, for example, Circle's bridge standard, but are you doing that on top of something like LayerZero? Are you doing it on top of your own bridge? Are you using your canonical bridge and it's a 7-day bridging down period? Like, how are you going to do that? And what we wanted to do with Stargate V2, and I think we've done quite successfully, is basically launch like one standard way to do it. It's compatible with Circle's bridging standard. It's composable across all of the ecosystems that we go to. And that USDC is like the canonical version within that ecosystem. And so we've issued, for example, bridged USDC into 30 or 32 ecosystems today. It's the exact same user experience every single time. It's issued out of the protocol, same security parameters. And again, you can now bridge from any of the ecosystems we support into this new chain. So yeah, the experience is always, I suppose, a little bit stressful, a little bit intense, because you're a part of that chain launch every single time. But it's been a tremendous learning experience for sure.
But that's what I was going to say. I feel like everyone who we work with and cross paths with when we're talking about chain launches, you guys are in like jumping from the frying pan into the fire or staying in the fire for everyone that comes across.
Yeah. But and I mean, again, we've had the first couple were of course like felt quite intense, but we've now done so many that we actually find ourselves almost playing the reverse role on a call where there's a team leading up to launch and they're 4 weeks out from their mainnet launch and they're stressing about all these things. And because we've been able to learn from so many of the experiences that we had before, we are able to say kind of all of these things that you're stressing about around bridging and making sure it's secure and there's enough liquidity or whatever it is we have dealt with before. We know how to solve for those problems and kind of leave it with us. And I think for a lot of the ecosystems that we've built with, Berachain probably the most obvious one with Boyko. They needed to move over $3 billion. They needed it to happen in 48 hours. It just needed to work, and it did work, and it worked flawlessly. And like them not having to stress about, will this transaction go through? Will there be liquidity for it? Will it, happen consistently every single time? And it just did, and it just works, and it has done for a long time now. So
interesting that you bring that up. I was at ETH Denver, and we covered Boyko. Pretty, relatively extensively when it was going on. We had Jack from Berachain come on and chat with Grant. And when you're talking about the cold start problem, I didn't even realize, ignorantly, Brian was on stage with Jack and a few of the other Bera guys, and they were talking about how LayerZero had provided the infra for Boyko to work for the ecosystem. And I thought, holy shit, which is how it should be, by the way. It's like you guys are now in the position that, and when I say how it should be, I guess it should be sort of operating indiscriminately and kind of, it should just be something that works really well, and people don't necessarily have to think about it too much.
Well, exactly. What you want, if you think about it from a chain builder's perspective, what you want is that when you go live on mainnet, your users can just do what they need to do, which is bring liquidity into your ecosystem typically. And what you're able to facilitate with something like Stargate V2 is that you can meet the user where they are. So typically 2 years ago, your canonical bridging experience was you have an L1 Ethereum typically, you have your L2, you have a canonical bridge. Users have to have their funds on Ethereum to get into your ecosystem. But one of the biggest unlocks that we've seen with Stargate and with Hydra is you can meet the users where they are. And so if you want to target base users for some reason, they can bring any liquidity, all of the liquidity they have from base into your ecosystem, and also simultaneously target Sonic users and bring all of those users into your ecosystem. And again, from a user's perspective, that's quite nice because you turn up to the bridge front end on day one or even the week one, and instead of being like, oh, I can only move from Ethereum, how do I get to Ethereum? I think they might support it, I'll go there. And you can just land on the page, these are all the assets you have, you can now bring them into this ecosystem. And so I think that's something that new entrants to the space will kind of take for granted, and is one of those things if you,
as they should.
When I tell my grandkids that you'd have to move my funds down to mainnet and I had to do it 7 days before because it was a canonical bridging experience, that kind of thing kind of gets taken for granted, but I think is such a big unlock for, again, the chains that are launching.
So let me ask you just about V2. And because we've obviously dipped in and out of it there in Hydra, however I'm pronouncing it, is just to go back a step, what did that introduce on a top line level from the previous version? What was the issues that you were looking at and going, we could do this better, intro V2, and how Hydra plays into it?
So the biggest learning from Stargate V1 was, or even before Stargate V1, the state of bridging was that, as I kind of described earlier, when you were bridging to a new ecosystem, the issuance of that asset, let's just call it USDC for simplicity, was it was up to that chain how they were going to deploy it. Again, it might have been a LayerZero OFT, it might have used a canonical bridge, it might have been using some third-party bridge. And that was never a consistent experience for the user, and also not a consistent security assumption. And so we've seen many hacks in crypto today, a lot of them happening with bridging providers, unfortunately. And so something like kind of Phantom relying on multi-chain assets, and then multi-chain having an unfortunate exploit, meant that all of the assets within that ecosystem, to a naive user who says, I'm holding USDC on Phantom, why is my USDC worth 6 cents all of a sudden? It was because the underlying bridging provider is no longer kind of whole. And so that sort of user experience is really poor. And so the idea behind Stargate V1 was it will only use native assets. So it'll only support USDC that Circle has issued, because that is USDC. The understanding was that kind of wrapped assets would disappear. They're awful. They keep getting exploited. Let's all just use native assets. And the kind of bet with Stargate V1 was that the whole industry would move in that direction, that native assets would be what we use on every single chain. But as is quite understandable, with the Cambrian explosion of chains that's happened, Circle is not going to every chain, Tether is not going to every chain. Why would they? Not every single one is going to win. It's quite a heavy kind of regulatory lift and legal lift and infrastructural lift to get there. And so we kind of still saw the proliferation of bridged assets or wrapped assets. But you still have that same problem of different issuers issuing them not being composable across ecosystems, having to use different front ends to then get down, and some of them being like a 7-day bridging, some of them being 24-hour bridging, basically like an inconsistent user experience. And so Hydra specifically within Stargate V2 was built in order to solve that problem of new chains launching and needing day one liquidity of the core assets that users trust, and issuing those in a standard, compliant, and composable way so that, again, like your user experience when you go to these new ecosystems is consistent. And you know that, okay, this is a bridged USDC. I know USDC. I know bridged USDC. I know Stargate. I trust Stargate because they've deployed to these 15 other ecosystems. I've used their assets before. I know the experience is going to work. And so with Hydra, we built a way for us to issue these like pre-native assets, extending these regular ERC20s as a LayerZero OFT to these ecosystems so that the protocol itself can mint and burn these assets freely, and provide the users with again, consistent experience.
Okay, great. And I wanted to ask you about the AI-driven planning module as well. And I want you to just explain that to me in as layman terms as possible, as far as like what people should need to know about that. If you were hearing it for the first time.
So to explain it in its most simple term, when you're bridging to a new chain where Stargate can mint the asset. So let's say I have $1 million on Ethereum. I want to go to Berachain. I lock my $1 million of Circle USDC on Ethereum. Stargate mints me $1 million in Berachain. Nice and simple. When I'm then going back in the other direction and leaving Berachain with $1 million, when I burn the USDC on Berachain, I need to know whether or not there's enough USDC on Ethereum in order for me to take that liquidity out. And because Stargate supports many different chains with these pools of liquidity, you're not guaranteed that, if you had $100 million in Berachain and you wanted to bridge out to Base, you want to know whether or not there's $100 million before you get there. But obviously, the Berachain L1 doesn't know what the state of Base is because they're different execution environments. So, not very well-known fact is that Stargate is actually two separate applications. One is the kind of token messaging level, which is the value transfer. And one is credits, which, for lack of a better term, is just the accounting. And that maintains this like global state for Stargate, such that when you are leaving Berachain, the pool on Berachain knows what the state of Base is because we maintain this global accounting. And so when you try to bridge from Berachain, if there isn't enough liquidity for you on Base, it will fail on source chain. And so you can only ever initiate a transaction if there is enough liquidity for you on destination. And so for a layman, what that means is your transaction will always go through. Because when you start that transaction, the protocol already knows whether or not there is enough liquidity for you on destination. And so it does get relatively complex. And Stargate V1 had this in a very similar way under something called the Delta algorithm. It's very expensive to keep on-chain and doing all of this accounting on-chain. And so what the introduction of the AI planning module allowed for was for us to take that basically algorithm, that mathematics off-chain, and run some relatively simple kind of algorithms to ensure that the pathways that need the most liquidity have the most liquidity. And so it takes in user demand, takes in volume over past X amount of time, takes over kind of market situation, and it then like imprints this liquidity accounting onto the protocol. And so again, your most popular routes will have the largest amount of liquidity, and some of the more like unpopular routes will have less liquidity until they see a whole bunch of volume, and then they'll be able to pull liquidity over to those.
And messaging protocol in the truest sense of the word.
Yes,
basically.
exactly.
Word, not world. It's like pivot in the conversation now, I think. Because I feel like we've talked quite a lot there about back-end messaging and making sure that chain A is talking to chain B. And as we are well aware now there are more L1s and L2s than there are humans on Earth, never mind people in crypto, which is great for Stargate.
Correct.
Great for Stargate.
I love all of our chains equally.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. But but not great for the user. Now, Stargate to me has always been like the go-to bridge from wherever I need to be as well. Like, how are you guys thinking about? Because as I say, there are two different messages here, depending on the type of people that are listening to us chat right now. Whether it's devs that go, "Oh shit, I'm aware of this," or whether it's users that like. Do you just think you're in a place now where it's such a household name that you don't even need to be educating people on sort of like you started to? It seems like such a safe haven for me that I would never. And there's names out there and aggregators and all this kind of stuff now. But how do you view your own reputation in that sphere? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think
arena or other.
I mean, there's always hopefully new users coming to crypto as well.
Yeah.
Which we want to make sure that Stargate is known as a place that you can trust, but also that you can use for everything that you need to do. And I think this year's been particularly important for that because for many of the largest chain launches, the only place you could bridge to those chains was using Stargate's front end.
Yeah.
And like we were the one place you could go to. And so obviously having that kind of brand salience of, oh, I wanted to go to a chain they've just launched. Stargate probably supports them day one because they've supported the last 10 chains that I bridged to on day one. And so kind of ensuring that we can continue to keep up with that pace of chain deployments. It's very difficult to do. There are many chains launching, but we try and support as many of them as possible.
Yeah.
And really, one of the things that we care the most about, and particularly because of the niche that we're in within crypto, is just security and reliability. So making sure that we have a very, very loyal user base. We have a much, much higher average transaction size than other bridges because I think people trust that Stargate as a protocol will work. The OFTs that we support on our front end will work. There haven't been any front end exploit. Just everything just works. And as you were saying earlier, when you're bridging, you just need it to work. You just want it to work. You will double check 100 times, but if you've used Stargate once or twice, you'll probably still check. If you've used it 100 times, you should be able to trust that what happened last time is going to happen this time as well. So just maintaining, obviously trying to continue expanding, but maintaining that security element, I think, is very important.
So beyond quite literally supporting and consulting everyone who's launching, like what else are you guys working on? Like, because as we said before we started rolling, massive growth, teams booming, like where are you allocating resources? What have you got your eye on?
We just went through a big kind of rebrand and rebuild of the product. So not a rebrand, but like a refresh of the brand, just because it had been a long time. And so having a brand new product that's available is a lot snappier, kind of is up to date with the current expectations of DeFi. Was a big focus for us over the last, call it 3 to 6 months. But we have also realized the power of the protocol that we've built. So as I was saying earlier, we typically will launch Stargate with 3 assets. There's USDC, USDT, wrapped ETH. That's what people wanted in a new ecosystem. But today there are plenty of other assets that users are interested in having. USDT doesn't expand so much anymore, and they kind of use USDT Zero as an expansion tool. But even USDT Zero won't make it to every single chain. And so how can we support them in their expansion? There are other stablecoins that sometimes power the entirety of an ecosystem. I think Athena and USD have done a tremendous job, and obviously they'll power Converge themselves, but I think there are other ecosystems that kind of want to use SUSDE, for example, as the backing asset for the whole ecosystem or as the canonical stablecoin. And there will always be other stablecoins or other tokenized assets that kind of are desired day one within an ecosystem. There are like chains that are launching today that are very much focused on RWAs, and they want to have the stablecoins that are launching, but they may also want tokenized gold, they may want tokenized stocks. And can we help to kind of expand our offering to not only offer the 3 core assets that people want to bridge, but a standardized way of bringing value across all.
Yes, let's go there. RWAs and all the different sort of I guess narratives and like use cases for this industry that we work in. Like, where's your head at with like where things are at right now before we go down the DeFi rabbit hole? Like, what excites you at the minute?
I think just the acceptance of the fact that we've built something quite cool, quite useful. Like we as participants in this industry and probably as has been said many times in this bar, like there is really something here, like something cool is being built and like there will be a use case for it. And it's probably feeling kind of real for the first time, like Circle's IPO and going 10x. Like there is an interest in stablecoins, and there's a reason there's an interest in it. And like Stripe, one of the most successful companies in the world, is going very heavily into crypto, because not only do they now see that there are users, but like the technology makes a lot of sense, and we've been trying to kind of scream this to announcements for a long time. And so just almost like having that validation from the wider world is just interesting to see. I think it's been fascinating to watch. Unsurprising, but fascinating to watch what exactly picks up in the kind of wider world. Like a lot of people will say that, you know, Bitcoin as a store of values is fascinating, and that has been true. But, you know, we're going through this whole stablecoin narrative at the moment, and like how far will that go? How ingrained will stablecoins get into our traditional finance system? Like a lot of us believe that they will become very ingrained and actually become the fundamental layer of a lot of that. And so, I think the long story short, just really intrigued to see that there is actual interest from the wider world, and interested to see what exactly it is that picks up interest.
It's funny, we have a weekly podcast where it's just like news aggregation, the Blocmates podcast, obviously. And I say obviously, but we named it that like 2 weeks ago. Like we had every fucking name under the sun, and I was like, why are we not just calling this the Blocmate? And we did literally the last episode I filmed before we flew out. One of the like what you need to know sections was like Lavina, who's our head of news and like editorial lead. I said, look, we have to cover the stablecoin thing. And funny enough, like those people that are on chain and like in the industry, there's not a great appetite to like hear about stablecoins and stuff all the time. But I was rattling through these headlines and the mass retail adoption, Walmart, Apple, Amazon, like it was kind of astounding. We had to just do like a breeze through. And I'd like said, look, I know this is not exactly the sexiest thing to talk about, but it's wild. It's almost like happening. And no one's even like And as funny as it is watching Stephen Colbert talk about Farcoin and shit like that, that's where it's actually happening, as you say.
And one thing that I've always kind of wondered is how much will the wider world actually talk about stablecoins versus just use them? Because again, as we were talking about earlier with like Interop UX, like will the world talk about Interop, or will they just use Interop? They'll probably just use Interop. And I think with stablecoins, they'll just use stablecoins, and it doesn't actually matter what it is that's powering it underneath. We just know that it's faster and it's cheaper and more secure and whatever. And I think that will probably start to be more obvious, that people won't really talk about like, oh, thank God for stablecoins, what a tremendous invention. It'll just be, this Circle company has done really, really well, and so have all these other stablecoin companies. I wonder what they do without actually knowing, like when they go use Shopify to pay for something, they're actually they're settling on a Sunday using whatever USDC. So I think it'll be cool to see. And like, I mean, stablecoins very clearly are a narrative, and watching them grow across ecosystems is fun.
It's weird though, isn't it? Because like I think because we're so attuned to the madness that we well, I know I do, speaking for myself, and because we log into it every single day, but it it has come on leaps and bounds from, and like when you look at like I think about SoFun, because I was looking at it yesterday, and we like those guys a lot. When you talk about like nailing a UX UI for a new user, as you said as well, like realistically, like you shouldn't actually have to think about, like you don't go on Instagram or whatever and wonder how your friend in America has managed to upload a photo that you can see at the same time in London or whatever. It's why the hell are we doing it differently? Like, are we the only industry that talks about?
And I think it is just because like the technology didn't really exist to see these things before, and so there was a lot of, I think CT was just like an open forum of, I've built this thing, but I'm missing these building blocks. Where are these building blocks? Can someone please build these building blocks? And now we're kind of filling a lot of those in. And like the account abstraction means you can now do gasless things. You can do it across different chains. The interrupt tooling means that you can like plug it into where the users are. And so Yeah, I think the experiences will just continue to come along, but it's just taken a while to build a technology that is actually usable.
So what's going on for the rest of this year then? It is what, June now? What you guys got going on? I feel like we could, if we had this interview again in 2 months' time, things would probably look a lot different. So
hopefully,
timestamp this now for me. What's going on?
We are, as I said, over the last couple of months have been kind of refreshing and redoing the product to make sure that it is kind of up to industry standard again. Or kind of best in class. And then now we'll really be focusing on taking advantage of the network effects that we built. And again, our primary goal is to ensure that users know they can come to Stargate for anything that they need to do across different chains. And that is true because users still use bridge front ends today, but we are also very much pushing heavily into kind of developer-focused ecosystems, developer tooling. And so there's probably two routes. One is you will continue to be able to use Stargate for everything that you need to do across all chains, but you will probably also use Stargate many days a week without knowing that you're using Stargate because it'll be abstracted beneath another application that you're using.
Awesome. I think that's us. I feel like we got through a lot there. We can turn the cameras off now and go and get a beer and be unprofessional.
Sounds wonderable.
That's it, Lance. I promise you it'd be like relatively...
that was awesome. That was
but thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
I appreciate it. It's good fun.